Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this annual general meeting of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee of the 27th of May 2025. Our first item on the agenda today will be to appoint a chair of the CJC for the forthcoming year. Could I have a proposer, please, for the position of chair?
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I'd like to propose Councillor Rob Stewart for chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And could I have a seconder, please?
Yes, Craig, I'm happy to second Rob Stewart as chair.
Thank you very much. Members, anyone wish to vote against, or can I confirm everyone is happy for Councillor Stewart to be appointed as chair today, please? Great, there we go, that's confirmed. So before I hand over to Councillor Stewart, I'll just confirm the vice chair arrangements. So could I have a proposer, please, for the position of vice chair?
Again, Craig, could I propose Councillor Darren Price for vice chair?
Thank you very much, Councillor Harvey. Could I have a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second that proposal, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone wish to vote against, or can I take it the members are happy to confirm Councillor Dan Price as vice chair? I see no objection. So on that note, I will now hand over to Councillor Stewart as our forthcoming chair for the year.
Thank you very much, Craig, and thank you, colleagues, for your continued support. I'll do my best to ensure that we make all the progress that we intend to this year again, and look forward to working with all of you over the year. I'll start then by just running through the usual order, which is just to remind you that we have recording taking place. If you're not speaking, to keep your microphones on mute, and if you're online, to raise your virtual hand if you wish to come in on any item. And obviously in the chamber, if somebody could let me know if somebody wishes to come in who are sitting in the chamber today. Moving on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Could I ask if there are any declarations that members need to make for today's meeting?
I see no indication, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. With no declarations, then we'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes of the previous meetings. They're on pages 7 to 12 of your agenda. I've not been asked for any corrections, but happy to take them if there are any. If not, I'm more than happy to move them as a true record and would look for a seconder, please.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. In that case, are we all happy to agree the minutes? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Right, with that done, we'll move on to our first full item for today, which is the reconstitution of the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee, pages 13 to 36 of your agenda, and I'll call Craig in to take us through this item. Craig, over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. So this is a report we bring on an annual basis to the CJC. It's effectively reconstituting all our sort of decision-making forums and relevant bodies for the course of the next year. It'll be easier probably to take the recommendations en masse at the end, but what I'll do, I'll just talk through each of the recommendations I'll be asking members ultimately to make today, just so you can understand the reasoning that sits behind them. There are a few little tweaks as well, which I just need to pick up as we go, which hopefully will make sense as we progress. So just to confirm, in the first instance, this is a body that is created by the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021 as the mechanism for regional collaboration between local government, and the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee is the body that's been established for this region. So in order to meet its legislative objectives, we have agreed that the members of the CJC are the cabinet leaders of Carmarthenshire Council, Neath Talbot Council, Pembrokeshire Council, and the City and County of Swansea Council, a member of Banner National Park Authority, and a member of Pembrokeshire Coast National Park Authority in respect of strategic planning as well. We have indicated that the CJC members are entitled to vote in any matter decided by the CJC, except that the National Park representatives can only vote in a matter which in respect of strategic planning, but previous decisions, we've said that they will be co-opted in a non-voting capacity, and it's intended that this will be renewed for the forthcoming year. We've also created some subcommittees to help discharge our various functions, and the proposal this year is to establish 3 subcommittees as opposed to the 4 which we did last year, and have a specific subcommittee for regional transport planning, economic well-being, which will now include energy as opposed to it being a separate subcommittee, and strategic development planning. And the representatives then to those subcommittees be comprised of the relevant cabinet members of the 4 constituent councils and the lead members of the relevant national park authorities. members of the National Park Authorities are also co-opted to the other 3 subcommittees as well. The meeting shall be chaired by the Cabinet Leader of the Constituent Council, or they can nominate that function to another Cabinet member within their authority, or an alternative leader from the other authorities, so the flexibility will ultimately vest in them. We are required by law to create a governance and audit committee, and the CJC establishment regulations set out the processes to which those appointments will be made. In essence, as the CJC, we have designated Pembrokeshire Council as our organisation who undertakes our audit functions. So it's proposed that they be the host authority for the governance and audit committee, and the chair of that committee come from Pembrokeshire Council, there being their lay member. And the terms of members and references of that committee are set out in our constitution, and the members to be appointed to that committee are set out in the report as well. We are also required by law to have a standards and ethical framework, and as opposed to creating our own standards committee for the CJC, given the relatively low level of work, it was determined to appoint Neath Talbot Council Standards Committee as the de facto standards committee, and again that recommendation is to continue for the forthcoming year. The reason Neath Talbot being is included is because I'm the monitoring officer for the CJC, and Neath Talbot is my host authority, so hence the reason it made sense ultimately to try and keep the 2 together. We will also be required to constitute an overview and scrutiny committee, and the members of that overview and scrutiny committee are included at paragraph 28 of the report. I would like to make members aware, though, of one potential change which has arisen in the last week in respect of Pembrokeshire County Council. It will no longer be Councillor Mark Tierney being appointed to the scrutiny committee. It will be Councillor Tony Wilcox instead. So, with members' consent, we'll just note that in the minutes for future appointments today. We also are required to include a meeting timetable, which will be the meetings that will take place ultimately within the Corporate Joint Committee for the forthcoming year, and those are set out at paragraph 30 of your report. Members will note what we're also trying to do at the moment is to try and make it easier for members who are appointed to both the CJC and the City Deal, in that we will be having the City Deal meetings immediately following the CJC meetings, just to try and make it easier for diary management purposes. It is also noted that we have decided that we will co-opt a number of individuals to the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee to strengthen the breadth of experience and skills available to the CJC, and obviously to enable the impact of local representation and provide specialist expertise on specific issues. So we have a number of individuals who have been named in paragraphs 32 who represent various organisations. One slight change I would just like to make members aware: we did have Mr. Steve Spill as the Swansea Bay University Health Board representative. It will actually be Jan Williams, so I can see who's on the call here today. So just to correct that for the record as well. At the meeting of the 3rd of December 2024, the CJC approved the appointment of a number of individuals to our private sector advisory board, and again it is proposed that ultimately that we will reconfirm those for the forthcoming year. During the course of the next couple of weeks, the PSAB will be appointing its chair, and that chair will then be co-opted to this CJC meeting as well. But in the interim, we have had one member of the CJC's PSAB resign due to some other commitments, or will be resigning shortly. Therefore, what we would like to do is ask members today if they would be comfortable to include an additional amendment to one of the recommendations that give the Chief Executive of the CJC, in consultation with the Chair, the ability to appoint a replacement member as a result of that resignation when it does arrive. Just make sure we can get the ball moving on that to make sure that they've got the ability then to attend the PSABs that are scheduled over the course of the next couple of months. So a bit of a technical report I need to bring forward there just to make sure that everything is reconstituted. The recommendations are included at the front of the report, with only the slight amendment being asked for recommendation J, in that we also, as members, approve the renewal of the appointment of the advisors identified at paragraph 34 for the civic year 25-26. But a delegated authority be given to the Chief Executive to appoint any replacement members that may be required as a result of any vacancies that do arise. Happy to take any questions that members may have, Chair.
Thank you, Craig, for running us through that. A few changes in there, as you outlined, but largely a rollover of what we had. Importantly, though, I think to highlight that extra amendment there to allow us to keep the full content of private sector advisors, and again, very supportive of us being able to do that, and the delegation to the Chief Exec to allow us to make sure that we keep our full complement of advisors and unpaid private sector experts. So open it up for questions. Anybody have any technical questions for Craig in terms of the structure or how we're going forward? If you'd like to show, and if somebody can let me know if there's anybody in the chamber who's got a question.
I see no indications, Chair.
Okay, from that then I'll assume you're all happy with the outlined governance structure. I'm happy therefore to move the recommendations with the amendment that Craig has added in. Could I look for a seconder, please?
Happy to second again, Chair.
Thank you very much, John. This one is only for council members to vote, but could I ask colleagues to show if they're in approval, please? Thank you very much.
That recommendation has been approved, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. We'll move on then to item 6, which is the comments, compliments and complaints policy, pages 37 to 58 of your agenda. And again, I'll go back to Craig to take us through this item.
Great, thank you, Chair. Again, as we move on our sort of governance journey and we start to put all the establishment arrangements in place ultimately for the CJC, we realised that we didn't actually have a comments, compliments and complaints policy that we needed to develop. So hence the reason we're bringing a version to you today. It's important to note we've actually had very few complaints actually during the process, as I've mentioned ultimately in the report itself. But the positive news is we now have a policy ultimately to be able to deal with them, and which we'll be able to record the various aspects, which we can then bring forward to the Corporate Joint Committee at the intervals then that we need to, Chair. So happy to take any questions members may have, but it's a policy in effect based on what all local authorities seem to be operating on, and it's just sort of replicated then in the CJC world.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. Pretty standard policy for most public sector organisations and local authorities. Again, colleagues, the recommendations are on page 37 of the agenda pack. I'm happy to move those on Craig's behalf. Could I look for a seconder, please? Steve, Councillor Hunt.
Yeah, can I just ask one question first, please, Rob?
Yes, certainly.
Obviously, yeah, it is pretty standard, but I've been saying this since I became leader, as you know. The CJC, the City Deal, many of these organisations that we represent. I mean, I welcome a policy of this nature, and as you say, most local authorities and other organisations have them. But I just wondered how we reach, if we want to be transparent, open with all our business that we carry out. How do we actually reach those that may want to get involved to improve? It's not always about making a complaint, but it's sometimes more about being involved. And I know we got subcommittees as well, and I appreciate that. But it's like being in a bubble all the time. And I just wondered the wider communities knowing our business. I mean, I know you've got a Parks Authority representation here, and I know in the political world things are not getting any easier. So I just wondered what behind the scenes work we are doing as a body to potentially encourage more involvement with the work that we carry out on a day-to-day basis. I keep saying this at every meeting because I do feel sometimes, you know this, Rob, I have a conversation with you. If we walked around our communities, no matter where we are in Wales, they wouldn't have a clue about this body, City Deal, you name it. Most of these organisations are not sort of known throughout our communities. So I just wondered if there's work that we do to encourage more involvement with what we are trying to achieve. That's all really, but thank you.
Yeah, totally understand the points you make, Steve, and do have sympathy with what you say. I think public often are not interested particularly in structures and boards. What they're interested in is what happens, as you say, in their communities. And I think one of the things we've learned from City Deal, I think, is that when those projects became real and people started to see things actually being delivered in their areas, that's when they became more interested. But I think it is always a challenge for structures like CJCs, which are operating on a different sort of footprint, are one step removed from the direct democracy of local authorities, to to get that engagement. But I'm sure it's something we can pick up with our comms team, Steve, in our various councils and bodies to try and promote the work. But I think the biggest thing we can do is to make sure that the programme of work that we agree starts to deliver and people can see a tangible difference in terms of the decisions we're making and what's being delivered via the CJC. So that would be my take on it, Steve, but I do understand the point you're making. I don't know if there's anybody else who wants to come in.
If I could just come in then, Chair, just to add to
Yeah.
another point there. One of the other things we'll be looking to develop over the course of the next few months is what we call the participation strategy. So members will recall that in local authorities at the moment, there's an obligation that came in the Local Government and Elections Wales Act to create a participation strategy as how local people can become involved in decision-making processes. We'll be looking at something similar now ultimately for the CJC, and that will be brought forward to the CJC members probably at some point before the end of this calendar year, Councillor Hunt, as well. So that will be a policy which shows how we are then going to be engaging with the public in respect of the decision-making processes and how they can impact in various ways as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Craig. Okay, we'll return then to the process of nominating and seconding. So I've nominated already. Can I look for a formal seconder then, please?
I'm happy to second, Chair. I thought Steve might have previously, but more than happy to second.
I think he skipped over the seconding bit, so I'm just doing it, just going back just to make sure we've done it correctly. Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Could I then ask colleagues if they can show if they're in favour of the policy, please? Thanks very much. That is.
Recommendation's been approved.
Thank you very much. Moving on then to item 7, which is Swansea Bay City Deal, the future of the Programme and Portfolio Management Office, POMO. This is on pages 59 to 62, and I think it's Craig and Wendy taking us through this report.
Thank you, Chair. If I just give a quick introduction and then hand over to Craig for any technicalities around the legislation involved in this. But this is a report for members' information. It doesn't need any decision today as such, and the primacy for this review sits with the City Deal Joint Committee. But as part of the review, there are many aspects we feel as officers are going to be linked to this corporate joint committee, and therefore that there are potentials around further collaboration regionally in terms of activity. So just very, very briefly, members would be aware that the Portfolio Monitoring Office provides the support to the current City Deal Joint Committee and does so to myself as Senior Responsible Officer for the City Deal, but also to you as leaders within that joint committee. The office has, over its period, been instrumental in bringing around the required governance for us on the region and the delivery of the City Deal. But as such was also committed to in terms of funding by four local authorities and subsequent partners. But as you will expect over time and as delivery moves forward into a different stage, that funding and finance is at a point now where it does indeed need review. So just for clarity, the office itself are now funded and have been a top slice of 1.5% from each one of the projects. That will be exhausted should all the posts be filled within that team this financial year. It also supplemented, or was supplemented, should I say, by £50,000 contribution by all 8 partners. That ended in March 2023, and there is no agreement beyond 25-26 financial year to continue funding that office. So now is the time, and it is apt, what with other regional governance taking place, that we review the current structures that we have in place. So the report essentially is there to update members on where that review is. I think there will inevitably be crossover and links in terms of efficiencies and a unified approach for us regionally through looking at the various options that we may have, and that options or those options and findings will be brought back to, obviously, firstly, the City Deal Joint Committee, but as a corporate joint committee, that report will be brought here as well for members to consider. And hopefully that will be before the summer break. So as I've said, there is no requirement for any decision. It is there for your update and for your information today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Craig, anything to add?
I think Wendy answered everything that I was going to plan on saying there, Chair. So I'll stay quiet on this one, I will.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, just from me, I think it's as Chief Exec outlined, it is sensible for us to do this review. You know, it's been now over 7 years since the City Deal became into existence. The 36 projects are in delivery there. It's well on its way to delivering what it was required to do. But it's just an element of what we do in terms of economic development in the region. Important as it is, there is that broader economic collaboration that we now have through the CJC and the subcommittee. Obviously, we've got the Celtic Freeport, which has come into existence since then. And we've got other big projects like things like the rail and metro to consider, which will have economic benefits as we go along. So sensible to look at what role the PMO play in that and how that is structured and what it supports going forward. So again, very supportive of this update coming forward. Not one, as Chief Exec said, for decision, but one for us to note today. But happy to open it up for questions for either Wendy or Craig on this item, if anybody has any.
Not so much a question, Chair, but a comment. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think the whole basis of aligning the sort of government's framework and streamlining and the PMO working across both bodies is to be welcomed. But I do recognise this is a report for noting, but just to add my comment there, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Okay, if there are no further comments or questions, then all happy to note the report and the update. Yeah. Okay, thank you, everyone. Moving on then to item 8, which is the Strategic Development Plan update, pages 63 to 68 of your agenda. And I'll hand over to Nicola, who will take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware the Welsh Government have mandated the requirement to prepare and adopt a strategic development plan within each of the 4 CJC areas. Within our area, there are 6 local planning authorities covering the 4 councils and the 2 national parks, and collectively we are responsible for preparing the strategic development plan. Originally, or some time ago, we wrote collectively to the Minister who had responsibility at the time, Julie James, indicating that we were not prepared to progress forward to develop or to prepare the SDP until sufficient resources were made available. The response that we had at the time was that there were no additional funding available, and we could use any spare funding left over from the preparation of the Regional Transport Plan. There was no funding available after that plan was prepared, and therefore we're still in the position where we have no funding available to deliver the SDP. We were in the process of collectively securing agreement in Wales to write to the new minister responsible for planning to reiterate our position and again request funding. However, it appears that the position is changing in Wales. In the Cardiff Capital region, they have prepared a delivery agreement and they have submitted that, I believe, to the Welsh Government for approval. We're also aware that up in North Wales, they are in the process of preparing a delivery agreement. So the report outlines 2 potential options: that we progress to prepare a delivery agreement for submission to Welsh Government, but in that we indicate quite clearly that we are not prepared to progress further than that stage until sufficient resources are made available. Or the second option is to hold our position and confirm that we are not prepared to progress further until sufficient resources are made available. It's also important to note that the SDP manual, which Welsh Government have indicated on numerous occasions they were in the process of preparing and making available, is still not available for the local planning authorities in the region to consider when developing or preparing the SDP. So that remains outstanding. The 2 options contained within this report were presented to the Planning Subcommittee on the 19th of May, and members of that committee voted to progress with option 1, which is to progress to submit to prepare the delivery agreement, but to, again, as I say, indicate quite clearly to Welsh Government that we will not be progressing beyond that point until sufficient funds are made available. So that was the recommendation from the Planning Subcommittee on the 19th of May, and those options are presented to members of the Joint Committee for consideration today. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, if there are any. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. Thanks for running us through that. And just from my perspective, again, very grateful for the recommendations from the subcommittee. I think it's the right decision or recommendation that they've made there in terms of us mirroring what's happening in both the capital and north regions. I think given that some extra funding has been made available by Welsh Government since we last considered this, and the fact that we do need to make some progress, but at the same time continue to remind Welsh Government that CJCs were supposed to be fully funded and that they were not to place an extra burden on local authorities or members. That is a point we will continue to make to them. But I think that recommendation, option 1, does strike the right balance of making some progress to a defined point, but then asking Welsh Government to consider further funding to help us pick up the entire, help us deliver the strategic planning document. So again, welcome comments and questions from members on this one. So, and just remind members, we will be going to the vote on this, and that National Park representatives also have a vote on these matters. So, Steve, Councillor Hunt, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. As chair of that subcommittee, it was quite a lively debate, you know, and a lot of information was shared. And Nicola sort of has outlined here today exactly the feeling of the majority of members, not all, I might add. However, I find sometimes taking a recommendation forward now, which is the right one, and I wholeheartedly support it, I think we need to start getting a little bit stronger. And I emphasize this because we've got elections in a year. We got to run out our own local development plans, and they've got to align sometimes with the strategic development plans. And where are we? That's the point. It's not just about saying get into the recommendation, which is the right one. It's adding to that, I think, in a letter by saying what is Welsh Government's plan, because it's clearly the funding. Of course, we know that, but going as we move forward now and then move into PERDA, we're going to be left in limbo. How long does this take to? Will we have a plan? That's my point. Post elections, and then potentially a new government going forward. I just asking the question, where to Nicola, probably Craig, and yourself with the experience you have, where does that leave us? Because I don't see this being funded. That's my personal view. Of course, I don't know what the ministers are going to say. So without a plan, where does that leave the CJC and local government? I just want to know or understand a bit more myself, really. But I just think a stronger letter needs to go from the CJC as you as chair. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. I'll pick up the political point first, then invite comments from officers. I think, look, we can't prejudge what will happen at the next election, or who the next administration will be, or what decisions they will make on structures in Wales. I think that's all open for discussion. I think the point being here, though, is that you'll know from your authority, Steve, all authorities are required to have planning documents to protect the planning systems. It is sensible to have a strategic plan, in my opinion, especially for items whereby we're looking at transport arrangements or things that affect us regionally. So collaborating on that, it's always come down for me as to who pays the bill to get us there. And I think that's the point we need to continue to make to Welsh Government. Various ministers have turned up with different flavours of how they see CJCs being taken forward. And you know, I go back to the first and most important decision, which was when we voted to accept CJCs. We did so on the basis that any new powers and responsibilities would come with funding, and that they wouldn't create additional burdens for the members. And I think that is the principle that we have to remind Welsh Government of, and I'm very happy to continue to do that to colleagues. I think the the only other point I would make is, you know, we have had some success recently with the ministers in terms of getting some additional funding. And you'll know, Steve, from a WLGA perspective, we've recently signed up to a partnership agreement, which again re-emphasises those principles of no new powers or responsibilities without the relevant funding. And again, that is something that will continue to press both regionally and through WLGA. So more than happy to repeat that to ministers and to lobby wherever we can, Steve. But I just go back to the option, which is, I think it's the right balance at this point in time to make some progress, but to keep making that point until we get some assurance of further funding.
If I can just briefly then, because I see Aled wants to come in. I agree with what you're saying, but the point I was trying to make is this is my view. I don't think we're going to have a plan. I don't think the fundings will come forward. So I was asking, where does that leave us as a CJC without a plan? Because so hypothetically, if we don't deliver a plan, what does that mean? That I know I see Nicola got her hand up now. That's what I was really asking. And I know you do your work to lobby, etc. But I don't see a plan coming forward, if I'm honest. But that's what I was asking. Thanks.
Yeah, understand. I'll get the technical officers to pick that one up, Steve. But my understanding is there are certain contingent things placed upon us that we wouldn't potentially be successful with unless we delivered an strategic plan. So, but again, a different government might have a different view. So we'll see. I'll come to Aled first, and then I'll come back to Nicola and perhaps pick up the points that everybody's made.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Rob. I'm just reflecting at the moment. You quite rightly say both that we don't know what the colour of the government will be next year after the election, and I think it's now very difficult to forge ahead with any certainty about those details. But what we do have a responsibility for, dare I say, is to make sure that we abide by the constitutionality of Wales in terms of equal opportunities, human rights, and particularly for the national parks, its sustainable development as well. And that a new government isn't entirely free to do what it wishes. It has to act within a constitutional framework. And perhaps we would be well advised as CJCs to go back to those issues and reflect what they are and how we've shaped our policies on that understanding. And that a government possibly may not be free to reduce the funding around those issues, given the commitments that have been made. I'm thinking particularly of sustainable development, where there is a responsibility on any Welsh government to promote sustainable development. It's not a choice, it's an imperative. Just a reflection for us for the next few months, I think, Steve, and we may have to come back to that next year and see where we reflect on it.
Thank you, Aled. Some very good points there. Nicola?
Yeah, just very, very briefly, in terms of the recommendation to us, in terms of option 1 today, the proposal is to progress with the delivery agreement only at this stage. Now, there is sufficient funds in place within the CJC to prepare the delivery agreement, so that is in place should members agree to move forward. What isn't in place is funding to deliver the SDP. In terms of our exposure, I suppose is what you were asking, if we didn't progress with the SDP. There is a legal requirement on us as a CJC to prepare a strategic development plan, and we've been holding back on that to date on the basis that there is insufficient funding available and the SDP manual hasn't been published. So I think there are grounds for us to argue that the reason or the rationale as to why we've held back to date, but ultimately there is a mandate upon the CJCs to progress forward with the SDP. So if we didn't progress forward in future, we would be legally exposed to challenge. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. Wendy?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, obviously I can't comment on the politics around this, but just in terms of the regional working, and to answer more generally for Councillor Hunt, the plan that we as CJC currently sign up to at the minute is the corporate plan. So in theory, that takes us up to 2028. So we have set and agreed those priorities for the region for that period. That said, I think for me, Councillor Hunt, whilst in the role that I'm in, it's important that we do what's right for the region. Whether that's legislated and what that looks like post-Senedd elections is for us to monitor. But my priority is to make sure that we just need to keep doing what's right for the region. One size doesn't fit all. So whether it's the CJC or another regional framework post 2026, we've been working regionally for many a year now. So I'd like to think that there are values to be had through working regionally, but we need to make sure that we get the right return for the public pound. So that would be my observation as the Chief Exec currently in post.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Wendy. Are there any other comments or questions for Nicola or for anyone on this item? Okay, so
apologies, Councillor Harvey, did you want to come in?
Yeah.
Sorry, John. Apologies.
Forgive me, Chair. I'm just getting used to the technology in the chamber here, so apologies. So, yeah, I'm very supportive of option 1 because I think we need to get the delivery agreement done. But I suppose my question to Nicola will be: obviously, delivery agreement is putting timescales and targets on the CJC to deliver. If funding wasn't to come through, and I do believe funding will come through, but if it didn't and we weren't able to make the particular targets, what is the comeback, if you like, on the CJC if it doesn't deliver in accordance with the timescale in the delivery agreement? Thank you.
Thank you. In terms of the delivery agreement, you're quite right. That identifies the milestones that we would have to progress through in order to be in a position to adopt an SCP. So it takes you through what the actual process for each stage of the adoption of the SCP and the funding stroke resources that we would require in order to do it. Now, my understanding is, which is that in the Cardiff Capital Region, their delivery agreement identifies the steps that they would go through and the timescales that would take, but it is quite specifically relating to having sufficient funding in place. So the steps are commensurate with funding being in place. So we presumably would do exactly the same. We would say, if we had sufficient funding in place, these are the milestones that we would progress through, and these are the timescales associated with those milestones. So we would make it quite clear within the delivery agreement that it is related to funding being made available. And my understanding is that is what has been done in the Cardiff Capital Region, and we would follow suit in the South West Wales CJC area. Presumably, if the funding wasn't made available, then there would be no reason why we couldn't go back and review that delivery agreement and submit an amended version to Welsh Government. I hope that's made that clear, Chair.
Yeah, from my point of view, thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you.
I think Robert Straws.
Chair, have you got connection now?
Yeah, apologies.
Yep.
My connection dropped out there. Apologies.
No worries.
Okay, so I believe we were just coming to the conclusion. Is there anybody else who wants to comment or has a question before I sum up?
I see no indication, Chair.
Okay. Well, given that no one has spoken against the recommendation that we received from the Planning Subcommittee, then I will look for colleagues to show if they are in favour of that recommendation, and that we go for option 1 as outlined as the way forward for this item. So again, I'll just remind colleagues that National Park representatives can vote on this as it's a strategic planning matter. So could I ask you to show if you're in favour of the recommendation, please? Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, could we have a proposer and seconder to formally put
My
that
apologies.
option forward? Sorry.
My apologies. I'll formally move that. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Thank you very much, Aled. Okay, and therefore then we'll, can I ask you to recast your vote? Now we formally moved and seconded. Thank you very much.
Chair, I can confirm that recommendation option 1 has been approved.
Thank you very much, colleagues. We'll now move to our final item, which is the forward work programme, pages 69 to 72 of your agenda. Chloe, is this one for you to update us on?
Yes, Chair, so the forward work programme is here for noting purposes. We've started to populate it for the forthcoming civic year. If any officers or members want to request any items, just let me know. I will just inform that we are going to be preparing forward work programme workshops for the CJC itself and the individual planning subcommittees. So I'll be looking at sending invitations out for those in due course. They're likely to follow your first meeting in the cycle. So just letting you know that, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Chloe. Colleagues, any questions or comments for Chloe on the programme?
I see no
Can't see any
indication,
indications. Thank you very much. And this one's for noting then. Can I ask colleagues if you are happy to note this update? Yeah, thank you very much. And then our final item, which was urgent items, there are none on the agenda for today. So with that, can I thank you all very much again for your continued support. I'm sure Darren would pass